everybody. Welcome to episode 8 of Guitar Journeys. And I have a special guest today, and we'll be introducing him in just a second. And the one thing that this particular podcast slash vlogcast is going to do is help create some community. You get a little bit of inside scoop on someone else's playing, and perhaps even see yourself in someone else's story and experiences. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Jon Garey.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And I met Jon at an open mic here in Ohio, and really cool open mic in Northeast Ohio. A lot of great artists coming in, performing. And I'm sure you guys in the audience know how open mics work. It's just a fantastic environment for meeting other players, interacting, see how people develop over time. So that's how I met Jon. And Jon has a lot of interesting things to discuss after we cover the typical 5 questions I ask everybody that comes on. So later on, stick around. We have some other bits that I want to cover, and this will be focused on music. So
We're going to get the 5+ questions.
that's right. Yes, the 5 plus questions, and then you get the plus one at the end. So stay tuned for that, please. It's gonna be really cool. So I guess we'll jump right on in and get into the pool. So the first question I want to ask you, Jon, is how did you become interested in guitar?
Okay, so I thought about this, looking at your questions and what was the history? How did I get to that point where I picked up my guitar for the first time? And I'm going to go back, I think, even a little bit earlier than when it first happened, because I think it's also associated with when did I really find myself being interested in music, just in music in general, and what are some of my earliest memories for that? So I spent a portion of my youth in California, in Southern California. So my father was in the Air Force, and I can remember at the age, and we moved to Ohio when I was 7. So I can remember at the age of 5 and 6, my neighbors across the street in their garage across the street from us playing Beatles records, and just the energy that I was hearing with that. But even in my own house, both of my parents liked a lot of different styles of music. So there was always music going on. For my father, it was things like harmonic hats.
Oh,
Um, and he liked also a lot of classical music. My mother, on the other hand, was the New Christy Minstrels or West Side Story or those kinds of things. So always that going on. So once we moved into Ohio, I think my next recollection really comes to be right around the age of 9 or 10. And this is for those of you who are from this area when WMMS came online as a rock station. Prior to that, they were kind of doing easy listening, but I caught right into that particular station, and loved what I was hearing on that station. So this would have put this right around 1970, 1969, 1968, and hearing things like Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin's first album and the later Beatles records and things like that. But it was also at that same kind of time that I started, I'm listening to this music and I'm starting to hear from my dad, that's not music,
yeah.
because that wasn't his music. So move forward a couple of years, and when I first picked up the guitar, it was at a neighbor's house. So I had a neighbor about 4 houses away, had a bunch of kids our ages, and they had this Fender Jaguar guitar, and would go over there and picked it up, and they taught me a few things. I think the very first song I learned was Little Black Egg, um, and really simple, but I loved this ability to create music out of this. And they actually let me take it home for a couple of days. I had to
Oh,
bring it. Um, but from that point on, I was hooked. And, I think right away, um, began to learn that I could figure out songs. I had the ear to be able to listen to something on the radio and begin picking it up and picking up how it sounded. At about this same time, I also had this little reel-to-reel 3-inch recorder. So I'm into recording already, with these kinds of things. Um, so that's really kind of, I think, the first point that I started to play guitar and really kind of picked up that instrument. Um, so at this point, I'm 11, 12 and starting to play. Um, Mowing lawns, that's how I made my money.
Mhm.
And within a year, bought a guitar.
Nice.
That was my own. So we had in my neighborhood Palucci's Music on Main Street here in Akron, North Hill. And I bought this shiny red guitar. I was trying to find it the other day on the internet if I could find it. And I think it was probably some Japanese model. It was cherry red, had four pickups on it, lots of switches,
Yeah.
and wouldn't stay in tune.
Funny.
You
That's
know,
great. Yeah.
but I that by the time I was 14, I was in a band with some other kids in the neighborhood, three guitars and a drum.
Yes.
And
Three in a drum.
uh, everybody played guitar and
Right.
drummer. And trying to do things like Cream and what 25 or 624, those kinds of things. White Room, all this Smoke on the Water
Sure. Sure.
songs. Um, to where finally, that guitar didn't really last. Again, it wouldn't stay in tune at all. But I ended up as a freshman in high school, bought an SG copy. So at that point, I had my first guitar that would stay in tune. And as a freshman in high school, got into another band with some seniors. So I made a friend in high school who played bass. I played guitar, and we got into a band with two other guitar players and a drummer.
Nice.
Three guitars, bass, and drums.
Wow.
But first band that we were in, and we're playing Mott the Hoople and early Aerosmith and that kind of stuff. So it just kind of progressed from there. So with the friend who played bass, he and I played in a number of different permutations of bands for several years, ultimately settling on really the three-piece format, which is when I started picking up Rush
Oh,
and and learning to play the Rush from the first four albums. That's really probably what taught me how to play guitar is being able to sit down and figure out those riffs and figure out those rhythms and playing as a three piece. Just and it just has gone on from there. But that's how I picked it up.
pretty amazing. Yeah. I mean, even those first four Rush albums were progressive in a way, not progressive, but he was getting more into what he was doing. So it's like you're growing with him as
Yeah,
you're learning how to play the stuff. So it's Zeppelin's is a very similar band in that respect, where you listen to Jimmy Page play and you grow from trying to figure out his stuff because he was doing something different each record. So yeah, that sort of parallel with Zeppelin and Rush that way, and I found that as well. That shared experience of like trying to like what the hell is he doing there.
right,
So like where is he playing this stuff too? Because there's a whole sonic thing that Alex was doing in his playing that's like he's definitely not playing it there. It doesn't sound right. Oh, he's playing it over here. So you're learning like more about the neck.
right,
So I definitely resonate with the story with them.
right.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, it's really something else. And even you mentioning like just getting into recording right away with tape, and doing things that way because we all kind of grew up in that regard where I didn't have a reel to reel, but I had a cassette player, so I was doing all the learning of riffs by ear using the cassette. So, but I didn't have the luxury of having the reel to reel, which is really cool. I never really got to use that. Was that like a real? Was it easy to kind of work the reel to reel when you were trying to learn this stuff, or was it
Well, again, as a 10-year-old, I had a 3-inch reel to reel, so that was some battery operated device.
okay?
In high school, I mean, I was a junior and senior in high school. I had a TIAC
Okay.
reel-to-reel stereo deck, and I bought this little mini Shure mixer, and so I'd bounce tracks. I'd just bounce from the right to left and keep adding to it. So I first started writing songs when I was 16.
Wow. Okay.
My very first songs were written at about that time, um, and I had an 8-track recorder,
Oh yeah.
8-track cassettes. So
Wow.
it was the very first thing I kind of put down my first record or album when I was 17. I finished it and recorded it to seven on an 8 track, gave it to my girlfriend.
Oh, nice.
It's probably, I think it's one of the few recordings I don't have a copy of. And
Oh, wow.
I have copies of everything else I've done, and I've been able to digitize them. So it's been really interesting to go back and listen to some of those things from those very, very early years. Um, but recording has always been a really, really important part of what I've done. I think it's helped me to get better at playing guitar and better at writing, and clearly better at singing.
Hmm.
Because in listening to some of those very first tapes and how bad I was
Right.
in my diction and my as they just my vowel sounds and all of that. But it's and even to this day, I record all of my practices and listen back to them
Yeah.
to see how can I get better at what I'm doing. Um, so to kind of continue that story on, at the point that I was a junior, senior in high school, I was really thinking about, I wanted to go into music as a career. Um, I know that as a senior in high school, during that summer after my senior year, I was probably playing 6 to 8 hours a day.
Oh, yeah.
And really, I would have loved to have gone to Berkeley.
Mm.
Fortunately, did not have the resources to make that happen. Um, but we're going to come back to that because Berkeley comes back into my story at some point.
Nice.
Um, so what I ended up doing out of high school is I ended up going to the University of Dayton to a music therapy program and started doing that. So that was kind of my really first time of having some formal education in music. So I think one of your other questions is am I trained or am I self-taught, right? I'm self-taught up until this point. I picked up everything by ear. Um, with the music therapy degree was also kind of my first foray at the University of Dayton. They had a place called the Monk's Inn, which was this little coffee house, which was my first foray into putting down the electric instrument and picking up an acoustic instrument and playing solo,
Oh, nice.
and playing my songs that I had written over the last couple of years for that. So um, it's kind of that transition from being in a band and playing these covers and all these very electric rock covers to really getting into this more subtle acoustic music, which has been interesting, and probably I'm really happy that I did that. I would never thought of doing that as a teenager, but as a late teen and early 20s, absolutely loved going in that direction.
Yeah, it's funny because you always hear people's story like, "Oh, I got this really bad nylon string guitar when I first started to play." And it's like, of course, the bad part is that the action is like, playing double dutch. It's like it's really high off the neck and everything. So it's very not very encouraging, when you play acoustic instruments because they're not set up half the time properly at all, and and people try to play on these things, but the overall sort of organic sound of that is such a thing that getting that early on is such a really valuable point that you mentioned also of just I never would have thought to go in that direction. It's a different sound, and even in that line of work is such a soothing, as you just described, and such an important part of the overall scheme. So I'm glad you brought that up because it's something that I think people kind of poo-poo the acoustic guitar, for whatever reason. It just depends, I guess, on what style you want to go to, what you want to play. But even the bands we all know, they were on the road and writing music on their acoustic guitars because that's you can't plug anything in when you're in a car, or on a bus. So nowadays it's a little different, but it's the whole thing too with acoustic guitars. If you're writing a song and it sounds great there, chances are it's going to sound really, really great on an electric guitar. So
And I managed to, I mean, so that first guitar that I got that was an acoustic guitar is, again, kind of going back. This was the era of Ovation guitars.
yeah,
They first came out, and I was working with somebody. as a summer job. He just got this, said loved his Ovation guitar that he wanted. He had this Guild D25. He didn't want it anymore. So he sold it to me really, really inexpensively. And I still have that guitar. And I still love the tone of it.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of my guitars that doesn't go out of the house.
Yeah, yeah, right. That's the whole thing. So you ain't going anywhere. He's staying right here.
But I use it for recording. I play it all the time. I love the action on it. And it was really helpful as you're talking about that whole piece of, so I I never had that issue of having the guitar with the action this high and my fingers bleeding.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm sure playing on that Jaguar was like a treat when you first played on that guitar and you brought it home for the week. It's like, oh, this guitar is like butter, you know? Probably felt really good.
For what I knew, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's great.
And I think part of what it's ended up doing, and if you listen to my music, I have a very light touch, a very light style. And I think it comes from, first of all, playing the electric guitar and then moving to the acoustic and really picking different styles of music then. Because at that point, I'm getting into Linda Ronstadt. Absolutely loved Linda Ronstadt at this point, and listening to, it would have been Andrew Gold and Waddy Watchell and those folks and what they're playing and how they're playing it and how do I make that sound and
Yeah,
how do I get that kind of rhythm and those kinds of things.
it's pretty good. Yeah, it's good people to learn from for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a good foray into the origin story, which is, excellent. I think all of us can relate to that at some degree. So I guess on that note, no pun intended, we can move into the second question is, are you self-taught or did you take lessons? And you already alluded to some of that already. So we can delve
So,
into more.
so I am self-taught for the most part. Again, I picked up most stuff by ear, and then I had a really good ability to listen to something, and can still do it fairly well even now. That listen to something two or three times, and I can have the basic chord structure down,
Right.
which is, you know, I'm really happy I can do that.
Yeah.
Um, I took in college, I had took class piano, and I took one semester of jazz guitar. But that's really been my formal training. Everything else is I've picked up and taught myself. So jazz guitar, my teachers told me all of my bad habits I was doing and the things I
Right.
did.
As they do. They point that right out right away. Oh, let's go down the list. Here we go. Like, oh, come on.
But that helped me, and I think what that ended up doing for me is learning a whole lot of new chords and new voicings of chords that I wasn't getting by being self-taught. 'Cause that all came out of, I had the Led Zeppelin book and I had the Beatles book and any other, that, well, what chords are they playing and all of that. So you were talking about Led Zeppelin earlier and things like, the Rain Song as an example.
Right.
So I have the notation of the Rain Song out of the Led Zeppelin book, which is being written out in standard tuning.
Mhm.
You know, but what I ultimately did with that one is I learned how to play it on piano
Oh, okay.
and then took it back to guitar.
Ah, okay.
It was an interesting process to be able to do that because I got much closer to what I was hearing on the record on piano. And once I figured that out, okay, now I need to structure my chords this way. So although I know the Rain Song was recorded in non-standard tuning, I play it in standard tuning. And I have to do some interesting chords in order to
Yeah,
get
right.
do it.
Yeah. Some yoga positions for your fingers and whatnot. Like, oh, geez, that chord. I yeah,
Yeah.
it's really funny.
So again, by getting picking up by ear. And so from there, even with that, it goes then into, I mean, Heart came out then. Yeah, Barracuda.
Yeah.
What a tremendous song. And sitting there and playing that. And then I continued to play Rush. I mean, all this time I've got all of Rush's albums. And every album that's come out, and let's sit down and see what can I learn from this particular album.
Mhm.
But then it's also, I'm thinking about, Chuck Mangione getting in
Yeah.
there, beginning. Let's get into some of this other style of music, Jean-Luc Ponty. And let's pick up some of this stuff and what can I learn from that and bring that into my guitar style and those kinds of things. So if I look and sit here, look at what else does I have here. Stevie Wonder. I mean, I have all the
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder stuff and just again some fantastic music that you hear in there. Ambrosia. I'm actually going to go see Ambrosia next month.
Oh,
Right?
wow.
They're coming here to Akron. Um, but things like that. And then I started getting into the folk singers, James Taylor, Jim Croce, and that. Then started getting into the instrumentalists, so William Ackerman,
Mm, okay.
and things like that. And these are all the things that have kind of helped me develop what it is that I know on the guitar and how I play guitar. And let's pick up little bits of pieces from what all of these other people are doing and incorporate it into my sound and the things that I like that they're doing and how they're structuring their chords and how they're doing their chord progressions and those kinds of things. It's just to me that's just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It totally is. And the fact that you can grab it by ear and try to make heads and tails out of it is just a nice event, which just, I haven't done that in a little while, but apart from just teaching people, but to sit on your own, like to hear something you want to learn, is like as time wears on, going back to that activity is always a treat, but as you're coming up, it's like, you have like those moments where it's like you can just lock yourself away and, you know, put on the headphones or whatever way you use to pick it up by ear and just dive in and flugelhorn. Yeah, it's like trying to like pick up some Mangione stuff, is pretty cool, so, because how often, I mean, you know,
Well, it's those melodic lines.
yes.
And how do you pick up those melodic lines and incorporate them into some chord changes that you're doing?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a really, really good exercise, and then the fact that you mentioned too of recording practices and things like that is something that we tell people now they should do more and more of that. Use your phone. It's like, but back when we were developing our playing and doing that with little cassette recorders, to kind of hear it back was like something as a routine, I guess. But I think it happens much easier now because of the technology that we have. It's the easier sort of process, so to speak, but still an important skill. I think that's one thing I latched onto when you mentioned that because I think I guess people are doing it more and more where they are sort of recording themselves with their playing, and hearing it back to do the very thing you mentioned, try to improve upon, what you're doing and hearing like your vocal inflections for vocals, articulation in the playing. All these things are so great to still continue to do. I think that's one thing I just kind of, from what you've been describing that I kind of latched onto. I think it's really cool you mentioned that.
Right. And being our own worst critic.
Yes, yes, that's right. Yeah, it's an easy activity for us to do. We're very well accomplished at that, I think, and I think it's really good. I like that a lot, and in fact, being self taught and hearing like your progression of like hearing yourself like trying to play a tune and go and hearing it back, thinking you have it a certain way, and it's like, oh wait a minute, no, that's you listen back to the original, and then you hear yourself like, oh, I don't know, it's pretty close. I don't know. Can I live with that? So yeah, and being like you said, being your own worst critic.
Well, I think
Um,
also
yeah,
part of making that your own style and your own music.
yes,
I never wanted to go out and do a cover exactly like the original artist. I want to make it mine
yes,
somehow,
yeah,
right?
yeah. It's kind of like you want to put it across like you wrote it, but people still recognize what it is. I think that's the nice thing about being self-taught in a way, rather than going into formal instruction, which we both have experience with. That is that very thing you just mentioned. Like if you are going to in performance and you want to do something more in the performance vein, to have that ability to like create or recreate a song, like you have the basic structure like you mentioned earlier. Okay, I have the basic chord structure, and then you put it across in such a way that people know what the song is, but you're putting your voice onto it. Is I love that too. It's really fantastic. I think that's something that we get, I think, especially now with the amount of information there is. We're in the information age. Having all the details, it's like sometimes it's good to not have all the details and just put it across like like I mentioned, it's recognizable. People know what it is, but it's like now you have your own on it, which is great. Oh, it's a great point you made.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point because, as I was playing guitar, tab didn't exist.
Nope.
And having the access to all the tabs that are out there and are now did not exist. I would still, well, I will look at tabs sometimes if I'm having a really difficult time figuring out one phrase or something. I'll use tab, but I still prefer to listen to the song and maybe have the block chord sitting up there, but I'm gonna play this the way that I want to play it.
Yeah.
So okay, so it's going to tell me it wants a G chord to a D chord. Well, I may just do a G major seventh to a D ninth or something
Right. Yeah.
and make it a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And a lot of times it sounds better, that's the other thing too. And then it's like almost you're writing a song in a way where you kind of, but not really writing a song, but arrangement wise, you're doing more arranging than you are learning it verbatim. And that's something too that happens a lot where, someone will learn the song, go, that's not the way it goes. And it's like, well, I'm not the dude that wrote it. So, I mean, you could be very faithful, but at the same time, I didn't write this stuff. I'm doing it the way, I feel I could play it. So I think you can get very hung up on details, especially nowadays. But I think as we were coming up, it felt more like an accomplishment if you got anything from a tune and people, oh yeah, that's that song by so and so, and then you knew, okay, cool, I'm on the right track here, which is nice. And then, like you said, having that freedom to recreate something, is really nice. It just frees you up when you want to perform, and people they're like, I love the way you play that. It's like that version you did is so cool. So that's nice when you get that kind of feedback from people when you play a certain song. Like, it's like I knew the song, but the way you did it was so inventive, or whatever the terminology people use when you get feedback from people when you're performing a cover.
right.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I started playing about a year ago. Maybe I'm amazed,
Right.
which is one of the songs that absolutely loved that particular song, but was could never figure out a way to play it.
Hmm.
Solo artist on a single guitar to
Right.
to get what I wanted out of that. So that was one of the things that I spent a couple of months this past year really analyzing the parts of that particular song and learning it and figuring out how can I do this and pull it off. And I get really good response when I do that particular song now because I figured out a way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like it starts with piano. So it's like, okay, well, how do I tackle that beast, and make it, a guitar thing.
Right.
So you bring the keyboard thing back in, and then did you do it that way where you try to do the keyboard first and then bring it to guitar, or
Actually play the keyboard part on guitar, the
okay.
intro to that on
Yeah.
guitar.
But when you learned it, did you do it on piano first and then bring it
No,
to guitar?
no,
Okay.
I learned it on guitar.
Okay. Yeah,
And
that's cool.
and then the challenge was the leads.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
what I did with the leads is I did the leads vocally.
Okay. All right.
So and that worked. I
Yeah.
mean, that's how I got it to where I wanted it to be.
Nice. Yeah, because it's kind of like that's one of the things you associate with that song is the piano beginning and then the lead that comes in. So yeah, that's cool.
Right.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah. Very nice. So that's good. That's a lot of good information in that segment. And I guess we can proceed to question three. What is your favorite guitar style and or genre?
That's really a tough question to answer because I have such a wide variety. Um, of styles that I like. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you my all around favorite guitarist. Let's start there.
Okay.
Of all the guitarists, and I like a lot of different styles, but probably my number one all around favorite guitarist is Phil Keaggy.
Wow. Okay.
Just in terms of the different styles that he plays, the lyricism in his lines. And I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to see him play.
No, no.
But he is one of these individuals who does these really technologically difficult runs like it's nothing at all. And it's such a pleasure to watch him play
Yeah.
that he is so into the music. Um, and so he's an individual that if you're interested in doing it, he actually has a site on the Bandcamp platform and a subscription service, and you can get all of his released music
Oh, that's cool.
subscription.
Yeah.
It just and this is literally thousands of hours of music. But he's my number one
Wow.
in terms of that. And then if I'm going to start going to genres, I like Alex Lifeson. I like his chordal structures. Um, I like most of his leads. Some of his leads leave me a bit flat,
Mm,
but for the most part, I really like that. Absolutely love in terms of guitarists all around for lyrics and feel, George Harrison.
mhm.
You know, I can sit here for hours and listen to George Harrison. And then same kind of thing, William Ackerman for things that are a little more calming and that. But I can also sit here, um, early Heart.
Mm,
I love
okay.
guitarists, guitar work. That's what Robert Fisher, right? I
Mhm.
think
Yep.
guitar work, but even Nancy Wilson and the work that she does. You know, I've never been while I'm a Led Zeppelin fan, I've never really been a fan of Jimmy Page, which I know is sacrilege to some folks, but compared to these other guitarists, I always tended to find his playing to be a bit sloppy,
Mhm.
and that may be the style that he's going for,
Right.
but I didn't necessarily like what he was doing there. Um, I have found Jeff Beck to be really, really interesting,
Yeah.
and the things that he does. I mentioned to you earlier, Indigenous, Stevie Ray Vaughan, you know, that kind of blues, and it's Indigenous is typically 1/4/5 blues, but they do it in so many varied styles. Um, Jimi Hendrix is another one that I like. I like Jimi Hendrix's playing style, particularly. It was listening to somebody the other day who was talking about it. Um, his leads also are very, very interesting, but also his chordal structures.
Yeah.
And he's one who has all the bad habits of, the thumb.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, he had long fingers and yeah, his rhythm playing is pretty amazing. But the thumb helps a lot to get those bass notes. I don't have those kind of fingers. I wish I did, those nice long phalanges. I don't have that. So that thumb was crucial to changing all those bass notes on the bottom. It's like, wow. Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, it's a lot of different. I like a lot of different styles of music, so it's. I don't know that I can say that there's anyone, but I would put Phil Keaggy at the top of the list.
nice. Yeah, yeah, definitely encourage you guys to check out. If you haven't heard of Phil Keaggy, check him out. Really, really great stuff. And if you haven't, I'm gonna put a link to some YouTube videos underneath this video. So it's good you brought him up because I don't listen to him half enough. I probably should listen to him more. Long story long, but it's easy. It's an easy fix. So, so that's great. That's a good, nice eclectic bunch, very eclectic bunch of players that you're into, and I think that's a good thing too, where you have each player you mentioned has a different thing, like you talked about earlier, that you can pull from and incorporate into what you do, which is we all do that. But I think even just the choice of players in this bunch you mentioned is pretty wide spanning, especially lyrical lines. Is something that you know um it's not really something that we're losing as players, but it's nice to have that incorporated in it. That's one thing I always enjoyed about George's playing, George Harrison, and also John Lennon to an extent. But George would often put his melodies in his guitar playing,
Yes.
which is really nice. And I always enjoyed that. It's all about the melody. And that's the thing that catches your ear and brings you right through. So yeah, good bunch of people. Definitely great. So that's good. So I guess we can proceed to the fourth question, which is, have you realized your goals on the guitar?
No.
Nobody says yes. I don't know what's the story with that. I don't know.
No, there's always more to learn. You always get better at what you do. Um, one of the things that I'd really love to be able to do is improvise better.
Hmm.
And I think I play pretty well, but I don't improvise well. And so that's a part of sitting in. And I've been doing a little bit more of sitting in with folks and improvising, but that's just not been something I've ever been comfortable with. And going back to the whole George Harrison thing, that was kind of George's. He didn't like to improvise.
Yeah.
And I like that whole style of I'm going to play the notes that need to be played here and nothing else and nothing more. And I tend to approach even the leads in my own music that way.
Hmm.
I'm not here to shred,
Right.
although I can shred a little bit, but that's not really what I'm going for. I want that particular piece. of what I'm doing to fit into the song that I'm doing.
Right.
So there's always this, I want to get better at playing guitar. Finger picking, finger style. I'd love to get really good at finger style. There's an individual in this area who I've watched him play some Phil Keaggy fingerstyle guitar and Chet Atkins style guitar, really, really good. I'm going to get him out at the Dragonfly one day this year. We've been talking about that. Um, but that. So no, I am not done with the guitar.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna now bring in the Berkeley thing back then.
Oh, good. Okay.
Because I wanted to go to Berkeley and I just didn't have the resources to do it. Well, I now have the resources to go to Berkeley if I want to go to Berkeley. I do not need another degree. But in this day and age, Berkeley posts the syllabuses to their classes and they post the books to their classes. And I know how to self-teach. So I have bought many books from the Berkeley classes and taught myself a whole lot more of what I was originally looking for. So that's the other part of it. Am I done with guitar? No, not at all. I have a ways to go and
Yeah.
lots.
It's a nice problem to have. I think that's something that I've in past episodes, it's been addressed, and it's nice. It's a really cool problem. If you're gonna have any kind of problem, in your life, it's like, no, I'm not quite there on guitar yet.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that's, you mentioned getting the books. I have a few books as well from Berkeley, and they're great. And it's a nice thing to kind of open a book, and you have a nice sort of layout of material, and you can progress through that as much as you want or as little as you want, and feel like you're making progress, which is one of the nice trade-offs with having a book. I know books are kind of, I don't know if they're passe or whatever, but I think just having something in front of you that you can hold, something that's, tangible, and you can go through it and you can progress, you go back to previous material and all that sort of thing. And there's a lot of the technology thing of tablets and using tablets, and you get that big light shine in your face and whatnot, which you can adjust, of course. But just having that book experience is so nice, and I think it's something that's I hope we don't lose that part of learning, of having a book, in front of you that you can go right to and just make notations on the page and all that cool stuff.
Well, it's that whole, I see this in the social media feeds where, you know, the question comes up, is it better to be trained or to do everything by ear? And I think that's really asking two different questions
Mm-hmm.
because I've played with people who have been trained who are mechanical,
Mm-hmm. Right.
technically really, really good. They
Yeah.
have no feel, and so I think it's a combination of both of those things. So um, I see people who have feel, but when I begin to learn technology or the technical skills or the theory behind it, it just makes my feel all that much better.
Yeah. It's like everything in moderation. When you do one thing too much, it can really hurt something. Sometimes if you do too much of one thing, it can actually help something, but it just depends on the person. And I think that's something, yeah, that's a great point you made, where there's a risk of becoming too mechanical with having too much, um, information, so to speak, because then that it becomes like a crutch. You can't get off that, and it's all player by player, I think, in some ways. But yeah, I agree. It's two different questions for sure.
We go back to the guitarists and the people I didn't pick, and I can think about some of those that are technically really, really good. Joe
Mhm.
Satriani, technically really, really good, and I like his music, but over a short period of time, I tire of it.
Mm.
Because it's just a lot of it's a lot of runs.
Yes.
How much melody is in this? And I want the melody.
Yeah. Yeah. I need the melody too. Absolutely. It's like, because that's the thing. If you can hum the melody, this is true in jazz, of course, too. And I was taught this a while ago, where if your success in jazz is that if someone walks away humming a melody that you played, then you got it, So it always revolves back to the melody.
You can create the earworm.
Yeah, that's right. I can't get this out of my head. It's
Yeah.
really, yeah, that's really important. So yeah, so it's we're so we're all in the same boat in terms of our goals on guitar. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to keep on suffering through it, and maybe accomplish something one of these days. I don't know. So, but yeah, and I guess and to piggyback that, what keeps you playing the guitar? So I guess that kind of is a nice little companion piece.
what keeps me playing guitar, especially now, and I'm going to give you again a little bit more history because I kind of, I stopped talking earlier about in my 20s and where I got in my 20s. And the last band I was in, actually I was in my 20s. It was right before I got married, and that's been decades ago. Um, One of the things that happened to me, unfortunately, is that, with life and kids and marriage and jobs and all that stuff, there was a period of time that I rarely played guitar. I again kind of put it aside because I had all of these other responsibilities and it really wasn't a part of my life. And it was still an avocation, but I would go weeks and months without playing at all. So about 10 years ago, my mother passed away and I would share a lot of my music with her. And again, I mentioned she was an important part of my musical upbringing. And when she passed away, I spent about 3 years settling her estate and getting her house sold and was able to I got some money off of that, which allowed me to buy new equipment and new recording equipment and that was also when I really began. The kids are gone here. Um, I'm not working 60 hours a week. I'm not doing any of that stuff. And I picked up the guitar again. So this would have been about right around 2015, 2016.
Oh.
Um, and really dedicating some time to really picking that up again and play. And it took a while. It came back. I got back to where I was earlier in that. My fingers hurt for a long time.
Yeah.
They don't. I can now easily play 2.5, 3 hours, and my fingers don't hurt too much after that. Um, so what keeps me playing is I have again found that love again for that instrument and playing music. And this is as I approach my retirement from my job, which will be in a couple of years, this is my plan is I'm going to do this. This is my next stage and my wife is on board with that. Um, Good thing that she knows. So even now I am out and doing something 4 or 5 nights a week, most weeks. Um, and I'm practicing every day that I'm not out doing something else.
Right.
Um, I have more songs I need to write. I have more songs I need to record, and just need to get out there and share. The other piece that has become really important for me is I don't have this idea that I'm going to become some huge star. That's not part of where I'm going. But I really like being in this position, and this is part of what the open mic does for me, is that I really want to promote and encourage other folks to get on that stage and share with what they're doing and how can we present you in a good light. So I go to a lot of shows of the local folks around here who are just getting started out and encouraging them, kind of giving them pointers. Maybe you should try this and letting people know, here's what I'm hearing. Um, Maybe if you try this, it might improve how you're performing. And some people take that really, really well, and some people don't.
Right.
But that comes from, I think in probably some other life I would have been a producer,
Hmm.
you know. And I think that comes from I have the ear. I like a lot of different styles of music. I can bring things together, and I think that's kind of what that production is all about, is to be able to do that. So that's ultimately where I'm going and why I continue to play and why I continue to share and compose and do all of this.
Yeah.
It's really it will become my next career.
Yeah. I think it's good too. You mentioned, like the idea of it being a producer for people at the open mics, to kind of give them some pointers. Oh, you should try these things. I think the fostering part is really a good big takeaway from what you just discussed, because whether it's your mom or yourself talking to somebody and like, I heard these things and you're playing and maybe you should try X, Y, Z. That's really important for, especially for younger players, is providing a venue, which you do with the Dragonfly Winery and on the monthly Thursdays, of offering that very thing. And I've seen younger players come play, not just guitar, just like, the last time we had the open mic that and you're hosting this young pianist who was playing. And I think it's not just relegated to guitar, which is what I like about the open mics anyway. It's a lot of different instrumentation, whether it's hand percussion or full band, the whole nine. The fostering aspect of that for young people is something that is great, and to get out there, not so much doing it online exclusively, which is another great thing we have now too, to be able to go out in front of people and work that up, because it's something that um, it doesn't feel like it's in short supply, but I guess in different parts of the world it might be a little more in short supply, where there aren't any venues for people to go to work on the live craft of
Yeah.
playing. Get the nerves out, get the, all that stuff out of your system, and be able to do it in front of somebody, and an audience is great. So I love that. I love that part of it too, is that you have that ability to foster people, and there's always somebody in our life that either encourages that or isn't so keen about it. So I think to have that element, for a player, especially younger people, is, yeah, I love that. It's fantastic. And I'm glad you do that. And it's something that's really a valuable asset.
And it's not even just the younger people. There are a couple of people who have kind of, we've all grown up together in the open mic scene, and listening to some of these folks who are also just kind of starting out and getting out there and playing and listening. And I've talked to a couple of people who said, you're singing this song and you're really trying really hard, but it's not in your range. And you said, let's give them a suggestion. Why don't bring this up a half a step or a whole step, and it's going to be more comfortable for you to sing. And they said, oh, I never thought of doing that. But from standing out in the audience, you can hear that. This is hitting the bottom of where your sweet spot is. And to be able to do that and then have someone come back, a couple of months later and say, I did that and it worked out really, really well. That's great.
Yeah, I love that too. And I'm glad you brought up the, people who are, the wide span of ranges of age, is great, because, as you alluded to with your own experience, is, you have things come into your life that you have to devote time to, and there's responsibilities. And that's the one thing I want to, even for this particular podcast, is bring people in a different, levels of playing, whether just starting out, or, you have a job that requires more of your time and you're away from the instrument more than you'd like to be, and then you finally come back to it. So the fact you brought that up too is something that is another valuable point. Of it doesn't matter really what the age is that the fact that you're still engaged in the pursuit of trying to improve your playing. So no age is left out, which is great. And that's the other fostering part too, which I think is fantastic. When you tell somebody who's a little bit older, like you said, you've kind of grown up through the scene, you see the same people from open mic to open mic, and you see their little incremental improvements. And it's like, and you can see them change as people and players from that, which I think that's another great thing from what you just mentioned. It's fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's been nice to have this whole new group of friends that I never had before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice having that.
It is. It's really one of the benefits of, doing the open mic, is that you don't feel isolated, especially what we just came through with the whole pandemic scene, is that a lot of people put records out during the pandemic, because there's really not much you can do if you're shut down. What do you do? Well, I have recording gear, I have instruments. Okay, let's do this. So, and then you get back out in front of people, and that whole community thing it kind of reemerges, that you don't really lose that, when you're isolated from people. You can still have communications and such, but just that coming back together, and sharing these things and hearing, oh, what did you work on during, this time away? And then you do it in front of people, like, wow, okay, cool. So that's just a great point that you brought in, where it's like, that community growing up with each other thing is fantastic, and having all these new friends. So it's really
Yes.
win-win. Really good. Really cool. And as I mentioned in the early part of starting this episode, is we want to talk a little bit about music. Not that we haven't been, but in particular, these guys, all these different CDs here of Jon's. I have a few, as you can see. And Jon has a new release coming out in February, I think it is, right, of this year.
Yeah, it's sitting on my Bandcamp site right now and it's pre-release, but yes.
Yes. And you can pre-order that. Now I'm going to put the link right below. So by the time this episode airs, you'll still be able to pre-order it perhaps, or already have the CD. So depending on your time frame of when you actually purchase Jon's new music. And I think it's really good because there's a lot of uh, links to Jon's music on the Bandcamp site and also on his website, which I'm going to include right below. You'll see it probably scrolling by, or however it's going to appear. You'll see it. You can go on to his sites and check out the tunes, purchase the music. So I guess haven't heard the album, the newest record you're putting out, which is called With Each Day. Just mentioned coming out in February. And I guess maybe we can talk a little bit about. I think the website itself has four of the records that you've released. Just You and Me, which came out in January 8th of 2021. You have An Echo of Silence, which came out in August 3rd, specifically of 2022. In June of 2023, Can't Find the Words, which is an instrumental record, and that came out on June 16th, I believe. And of course, With Each New Day, that's the most recent and upcoming release. So I guess maybe we could touch a little bit about maybe on those four records, or just maybe as a whole, we can maybe discuss a little bit about the music and kind of get the word out there for people so they can go and check it out. So, is there anything in particular that maybe with the upcoming disc or something from the previous releases that you'd like to touch base on that people could know?
Well, let me start with An Echo of Silence. An Echo of Silence was written over a period of about 35 years. The songs that were on it, and where it comes from is in high school, my girlfriend was adopted. She was an adopted child, and all the kids in her family were adopted. And she shared with me a lot of her feelings about being adopted and that as well as that. And so we had a lot of conversation about that. And that really stuck with me over the years. And I read a lot of information about the struggles that people who are adopted are going through. But I also then read a lot about the struggles that birth mothers who gave up their children went through, are going through. Um, and that's not to say, it was never to say that adoption is not a good thing. But there's this whole other piece that, you've got people who've been separated from their families of origin and have no opportunity. So, An Echo of Silence is ultimately a story about the birth mother and the child that she gave up and the emotional trauma that they have gone through from the point of, the girl announcing to her parents that I'm pregnant and I would like to keep the child, and they're telling her, absolutely not, no way, this is not going to happen. To the stories along the way of how both of these particular parties are feeling, to ultimately the happy ending where they do reunite. Um, it's something that I'm also been working on, and I have another whole piece to this that I want to do with this is make it kind of a narrative spoken word music multimedia presentation. I
Oh,
see it
cool.
possibly being a musical. I
Oh,
think
okay.
that's the possibility of that. So if you listen to that, it's really a story in 16 songs.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
This is the disc right here.
yes, that particular disc.
Yeah, with all the songs in the back. You'll definitely see a link to this particular disc. And that's something when I heard you play from the CD at Jenks Garage, which is a venue, a really cool place. And um, where is it? It's Cuyahoga Falls, and really cool venue. I never been to it before. So when you played and talked about this particular album, it's like I got to pick it up. So I went over and got it. So I definitely recommend you guys. You got to get on these sites and check out the tunes. They're really good. And I think that the one thing I like about the music as a whole from the three discs that I have is they're all the eclectic part comes into play, which you mentioned from your influences and genres of people you like. And that's the thing I appreciate a lot about the tunes is that there's you can hear all the things you talked about on each of these discs, and just the eclectic nature of the subject matter is really good because you have different types of tunes. You have the instrumental stuff, which is often can't find the words, so you have that part covered, and then of course the different subject matter that's varied. I really appreciate all that in your tunes and of your releases that I have so far.
And so if I go with each day, the new one,
Mhm.
The songs I selected for this, I selected them very specifically to experiment with different musical styles. So typically I write a lot about relationships in my stories, and that's really the themes or the stories of my songs. And my songs themselves typically start with a feeling. And then I write from a feeling, and from that feeling, we develop words that maybe capture that feeling, and from that, then the music that goes with it. Um, but with the new one, I really wanted to do a number of different styles of music. So, there's a bit of jazz chording in here, and a little bit of blues, a little bit of folk, and a little bit of Americana, and a little bit of rock, and stuff like that. So it was a fun album to do, and I spent about 6 months putting it together,
Yeah.
from start to end, and I very much enjoyed doing this particular one. And as again, going back to the Berkeley books, learning about production,
Yeah.
ta-
Right.
taking what I'm learning out of the Berkeley books, and how do I apply that to this, doing all of this in my project studio. So
Yeah. That's great. And like with each new day, was it something that like today I feel like writing this? Was it more like was it like an approach like that, or was it a little more I don't know what the word would be, but that's what I gathered from the title, what you just described. Like, with each new day, there's a certain mindset to perhaps creating some music for that day. Was that like a overriding thing, or am I touching on something that's abstract or no?
no, no, but that's a good idea. I have, because even though I wasn't playing guitar a whole lot, I've been writing for 50 years and writing music for 50 years. So I have this entire back catalog of songs that I've never played out anywhere other than to the basement walls.
Right.
And so I'm still kind of picking stuff out of there as well as writing new stuff. And it's a combination. Because I've actually have my next two releases are already planned out, and I know what songs I'm going to do in them. And so typically my pattern, even at this point, is, I'm going to promote this particular release, but as I start going out and playing around the venues in the area, I'm going to start playing the songs that'll be on the next release.
Yeah.
And kind of figuring out what's going to be my best way to present those.
Yeah.
But the songs are already written. I just haven't performed them out.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of performing too, we were discussing a little bit about the online opportunities for performing, and you have one coming up, I think, too. That's going to be happening. Uh,
Yes, I'll be on Open Mic America this coming Sunday,
nice.
which will give me an opportunity to play two songs. There are typically 8 performers on that particular platform. Each we get 2 songs, must be originals, no backing tracks. It's you and your instrument. And they do a little bit of interviewing, but it's always really, really very interesting and good musicians.
That sounds really cool. Yeah, it's great. And then you had Ursa Live, and then also Stage It, where two different um, sort of venues that you've used. I've seen a couple of performances, and it's a nice way to see an artist. And I'm sure you guys out there have experienced certain players that have done these online performances, and they're great. I love the idea of the interactivity, hearing this how the sets are put together, stories behind the songs. I love all that. It's like seeing a live show, but if you can't go to the live show, which sometimes happens, of course, it's nice to have that option to go and check out the player you want to check out and see what they're about. It's fantastic.
This is where the magic happens, in front of the green screen.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering about that. So what's with the curtain? Oh, it's pre-taut. That's okay. There's something
The
else
green
going
screen.
on here. Yeah, no, it's great. I highly recommend you
That's,
guys,
that's if I can be
supporting.
on the beach. I can be in
Right.
the forest, or wherever.
Yeah. Yeah, you can change it with each new day. You can put a different environment up on your wall there. That's great. Yeah. That's great. I think all these things, everything you've talked about tonight and all the points, just right up the alley, I think of why I have you on the podcast today. It's great. I think some of these things are really important to hear. The way you've approached the instrument through your learning process, and we're all still learning. Maybe you get to a certain level, maybe you still want to get more. out of the playing that we can. So I think that's something that this episode I hope affords you guys from hearing the stories that Jon just shared with you all. And I think it's really too valuable. The mentoring, performance outlets, the writing, technology and learning songs, recording your practicing. That's really, really good to hear all what you can hear. Flaws and all, whatever it is. It's good to hear all that stuff. It just makes you grow as a player. So I think that's one of the big takeaways from this particular episode is that growth factor. I think that's something that I think it's really a valuable piece that people can hear over and over again. It's a positive thing too. It's like even hearing feedback from other people about your own playing that you've offered to players. Seeing people perform in open mic settings and offering some feedback. Is good. You want to hear some honest feedback that actually helps you grow because it's very very easy to poo-poo somebody, and just rag them down. But it's also good to hear something of feedback where it helps you grow. So I think if I was to give one word for this episode, it's the idea of growth. That's one big takeaway from what you've shared with us tonight.
I would agree. Thank you very much for having me. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So glad you were able to come on and share your experience and your story. And if you guys would like to be on a podcast episode, email me. I'll include the email below. Doesn't matter your level of playing, your age, it's all welcome here. I think we can all learn from each other. We can all foster each other and we can all grow together. So please, don't feel that this particular podcast is beyond your grasp of attending and being on and sharing your story. I think the sharing part is really good because you're going to help somebody through your own experience and they can relate. And then we keep on keeping the community up and running. So thank you so much, Jon, yet again. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rob.
You got it. All
Appreciate
right. You got it.
it. All
You're
right.
very welcome.
All right.
So that concludes our episode. So any parting words you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Um, just if you're playing, keep playing. Make sure that you get better. Even if the fingers hurt, you're not getting it right. It only comes with practice. And make sure you practice.
Indeed. Indeed. Words to live by. Indeed. Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care. Yep.